We're tonight in Berlin to perform some of Heathcote Williams' work. Heathcote unfortunately died a year ago. He was one of the great English revolutionary poets, one of the great English anarchists, a key figure in the countercultural movement in England in the post-war period, and in the latter part of his life he wrote some massive, epic, revolutionary radical poems about British English history, and this is one of them, about a major event in English and British history which is submerged in public memory. The country almost went into a revolutionary mode in 1830, and it's almost unknown now. But this is an epic poem about Captain Swing, who was the tribune of the people in 1830. Here goes. The invisible Captain Swing, demon of direct action. Captain Swing has remained anonymous. His identity has never been clear. Many revolutionaries claim to be him, but few have ever come near. The first Captain Swing appeared in Kent, then in Dorset, then Middlesex had its own Captain Swing, then Captain Swings in Norfolk and Suffolk, and each one of them would do the same thing. Captain Swing would terrorise England's ruling class, the landowners, the clergy and the gentry, by insisting they put right what he thought was unfair, otherwise he'd dismantle society's machinery. For those who were being cheated while they worked the land, Captain Swing was their mythical tribune. The invisible Swing spoke only for those tilling the soil, not for fat landowners all worth a fortune. In 1830, the advent of threshing machines and agricultural machinery began to destroy rural people's lives, for they could replace the handiwork of 10 men. Instead of the farmers keeping the workers throughout the years, their jobs were stolen and the workforce condemned. Country communities used to thresh the corn in village barns, and such work would stretch until Maytime, separating grain from husk with swirling flails as they sang, safely knowing they'd be free from starvation. Lavender's blue, dilly dilly, lavender's green, when I am king, dilly dilly, you shall be queen. Some to make hay, dilly dilly, some to thrash corn, while you and I, dilly dilly, will keep ourselves warm. But then, instead of bed and board, labourers found they were being hired and fired at will. Machines meant less wages, so farmers could be gentrified by sending the workers to the poorhouse to eat swill. Machines meant the landowners getting the corn bagged up quickly and transported to market while the price was highest. If they waited for it to be threshed by the local community as before, low prices in a glutted market meant their work went to waste. So farm labourers, already being dispossessed by the enclosures and driven off from what was once common land, were reduced to forlornly waving their sickles hoping to be hired. Nature was being turned into big business by hidden hands. This led to the poor being found dead in ditches and in hedgerows. The poverty in Wiltshire was so severe that some had nothing but sour sorrel in their bellies, William Cobbett in his Rural Rides revealed. So the landowners began to receive letters delivered after dark. Sir, if your threshing machines are not destroyed by you directly, we will begin our labours. Signed on behalf of all, yours, Captain Swing! Sir, I understand you are a hard-hearted and oppressive overseer. This is to inform you that if you keep up your present proceedings, you will have much cause to regret the same. And then, in fierce capitals, I answer, yours, etc., Captain Swing! If they ignored such warnings, their threshing machines would be torched, along with their hayricks, spinning jennies and cutters of chaff. Brand new threshing machines were heaved into rivers by rioters, dismembered and hurled over the Dorsetshire cliffs. When a landlord, who was also an MP, Mr. John Bennett of Pithouse Farm in Tisbury, chose to replace his workforce with the newfangled machines, he was faced with rioters chanting, "He's tall and he's thin and his legs are a twin, his visage the picture of grief, sir. He seems like a thing that's committed a sin and less like a gent than a thief, sir." Then everyone shouted, "Flare up!" as firebrands were ignited, and Bennett found his hayricks on fire. The light exposed the whereabouts of Bennett's threshing machines, which were added to Progress's funeral pyre. A radical, Richard Price, claimed that the burnings were necessary to bring their gentlemen to their senses. If I'm not mistaken, as Swing mobilised half the country, the Times commented, "The whole fabric of society appears to be shaken." But their anger was the elixir that kept the farm workers' humanity alive, while the landowners controlled them through a form of slavery, with no right to their own land, nor a living wage, nor even a bed, and no prospect of escaping probable starvation, just as those who feature today in the Sunday Times rich list, annually disporting their gilt-edged trotters in the trough, sitting on constipated amounts of cash. So it's unsurprising when the underprivileged have had enough. The Sunday Times statistics consistently reveal that the 1,000 richest individuals in Great Britain own more than a third of the country's wealth, a perennial pre-revolutionary situation. But although the Swing Rioters' chilling refrain was "blood for supper," or bread or blood with every breath, in fact they'd kill no one. Yet more than 2,000 of them would be jailed and 250 were sentenced to death. For the Swing labourers were different from their enemies. Their violence was directed against property. By torching hayricks instead of houses, they distinguished between destroying things and endangering humanity, whereas to their rich betters, private property was paramount and more deserving of the law's protection than life, while the labourers were to serve merely as movable chattels, and their job was to be rich and suppress strife. So reddening the night sky with the landowners burning hayricks, laughing and drinking and lighting their pipes from the flames, sporting dresses for disguise and calling out, "All right, Mrs. Swing," such lively transgressions somewhat corrected the balance. Captain Swing would bring England closer to revolution than the country had been since 1688. And although Captain Swing breathed fire and trashed obnoxious machines, the Swing Rising was steadfastly non-violent. The radical orator Henry Hunt met a man in a Wiltshire village who told him, "We don't mean to do any mischief at all, but we want to see poor children with stomachs full of potatoes, not crying with bellies half full. I have done nothing, Your Honour, but what was proper and justifiable. said hardened worker Henry Howard in Ipswich Court, and he added, the general sense of the country is in favour of putting a stop to oppressive machinery of every sort. In Hardy's Wessex novel, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, Tess said, the glowing, pulsating machines were red tyrants which kept up a despotic demand upon the endurance of the workers' muscles and nerves. The steam-powered drum, spinning, served by fire and smoke, spinning definitely at 270 times a minute. Unlike Tess's co-workers, these denizens of the fields who serve weather, vegetation, frost and sun. Hundreds of thousands of acres of mechanically processed soil were causing people to starve. And with the workhouses filling to capacity, rural populations resorted to poaching game to feed themselves, only to be jailed by the system's rapacity. The clergy who sat on the bench and enforced the game laws would provoke the captain's sharpest sting. Sirs, if you don't behave better and give the poor man his due, I will visit you, or my name is not Swing. Ye clergy, ye vipers, you love money from tithes. You are not soul savers, you are man-eaters. You are blind, leaders of the blind. You are twice dead, plucked up by the roots. Yours, Captain Swing. A parson magistrate from Farningham wrote to the Home Secretary, Sir Robert Peel, if this state of affairs should continue, he said with a tremor, the peasantry will learn the secret of their own physical strength. He foresaw armbands roaming in the dark nights of winter, who will organise for far more radical measures of plunder. He argued, forgetting his Bible where it was written the labourer is worthy of his hire, he begged Peel to sanction the arming of the bourgeois classes by re-establishing the middle-class paramilitaries, the yeomanry corps. But swing crowds in Brighton were now outnumbering all authority. They printed handbills exposing the incomes of the wealthy, the stock jobbers, bishops, peers and MPs whose riches rankled, with each exposure being captured, nice pickings. One swing poster urging Englishmen read calculated the livings of the clergy and the incomes of peers. This equated to £4,611,232, multiplied by 100 for current value, which would maintain 98,224 families at £50 a year each. Oh, what a pitiless, helpless and cowardly people we seem. It read, 1 hour of true liberty is worth ages of slavery. Starvation is staring while your oppressors are rolling. It added, in luxury and wealth. The poster was widely read. When a policeman named Charles Inskip joined a swing crowd wearing a Phrygian bonnet decorated with tricoloured ribbons which he claimed had been worn at the French Revolution, Buckingham Palace now feared that the king's safety was no longer a given. King William IV, who lived in dread of the sans-culottes, had his attention drawn to the handbills which caused him to fulminate on the effect upon the lower orders of a licentious and unrestricted press. After which a senior judge, Lord Elmsborough, advised him, every beer shop is the seat of a political club for the working classes to read inflammatory newspapers, and every village is invaded by politics. King William made a point of informing his Prime Minister that he objected to pardons being given to rioters, So the Duke of Wellington would dutifully see to it that swing activists were subjected to mass hangings. Henry Coop of Micheldever, aged 19, picked up 2 sovereign coins after knocking off the hat of a landowning banker. William Bingham Baring of the British Empire's East India Company, with untold wealth from his skills as an investor, whereas Cook's wealth lay only in his impassioned youth and his hammer in the service of Captain Swing. But as Bingham Baring's hat was knocked off by the instrument, Cook got a death sentence at Winchester Jail. And although many of Cook's fellow inmates were also teenagers, they were nonetheless dragged out into the prison yard and forced to witness his execution. And although weeping, they chose to raise their smocks over their eyes for a shield. To express his satisfaction, the King conferred an honour on the Wiltshire Regiment of the Yeoman Cavalry. For ruthlessly suppressing the poor, the King's troops would be now known as the Royal Yeoman Cavalry. Yay! In order to grind down the swing rioters' resistance, treadmills were installed in the prisons as a deterrent, and large rewards were offered, worth up to £10,000 in today's money, but all this was to have little effect on its spirit. When Thomas Johnson said at the Rose Pub in Dover that swing's riots and its fires would be spreading, he was arrested for incitement, but he seized the state sneak by his teeth in his privates before escaping. And a group of shoemakers set upon a wagon at Wellingborough transporting swing rioters to prison. They released 12 men from Oundle and Thrapston, just thus saving them a march to their execution. Captain Swing was a bogeyman to all men of property, but a hero to those deprived of their rights. Swing's soldiers were becoming a social force to transform this wrong world, as Percy Shelley had described it. Stephen Eves, a sawyer laying a march at Gouda, said, "If the farmers can't pay the required wages because they've been encouraging the great nobs far too much, let all the tenant farmers give up the land to us." And just as when King John's Sheriff of Nottingham got greedy and Robin Hood took to mugging his tax men, 2 labourers from Crowhurst grabbed Wellington's tax collector and made him return every farthing that he'd taken. A flustered Treasury official would record, "It appears that some labourers have compelled one James Dengate, the collector of His Majesty's taxes, to give them back instead of paying the money to the Receiver General." One labourer who'd lost a limb in the Peninsular War publicly compared his 9p a day with the Duke of Wellington, whose skin was still whole, who had 60,000 a year, a millionaire. 2 Horsham labourers recorded in conversation in December 1830 said, "The taxes on tea, sugar and tobacco is given to them that give nothing in return for it, while we've been working all day for 8p. A reduction in taxes would do it, would stop all this burning and mobbing that's going on at present all over the country by those living on bread and potatoes. It's because fine ladies and gentlemen like to live without work, and all the time it's the working class that pays." But to the authorities, such sober sentiments were sedition, such a dialogue tumultuous assembly. Undeterred, a butcher, Robert Sutton, nicknamed Long Rob, burnt the MP from Banbury in effigy, because the MP had voted against ending civil list corruption, its nepotistical job and its sinecures. If you do not give 2 shillings a day, Captain Swing wrote to an Essex landowner, Mr. Brockies, all will come to ashes. And he emphasised the point with a menacing matchstick. Captain Swing's arsonists had a cryptic watchword. What the poor lacketh, the flame catcheth. Meaning that by sending farmers scraps of singed cloth, it could lead to a miraculous increase in the wages. It's dark at the end of your lane, we will light it. Read one message to the unresponsive, and we'll give you a burn before the year is out. Another, so magistrates and parishes put people under curfew and not leave them to perambulate the country. Large rewards were offered, worth up to £10,000 for information leading to the arrest of certain wicked incendiaries. And government spies infiltrated swing mobilisations, but all this was to have a little effect on its spirit. Anna Simmons, aged 16, from Whitchurch in Shropshire, who'd been beaten by her employer, one John Forgham, joined a swing crowd raising his property to the ground. So Hannah was sentenced at the assizes to be hanged. But since the jury had consisted of local landowners, and since the jury's foreman was a grandee, Lord Clyde, and since their livelihood was more important than Hannah's life, they preferred the Shropshire lass not to live. And in December 1830, a young woman named Sarah Bird from Epsom wrote to a grandee, if you do not raise the wages of the men and boys in your employ, your greenhouses will be blown up into 1,000 pieces. And when Sarah Bird was found guilty to be hanged, and when another woman was caught with a note saying, we will throw fireballs, signed the destroyer of machines, it was rumoured that the good captain was a woman. For Captain Swing's hayrick were sometimes cunningly connected by long woven fuses of straw bound by red ribbons, allowing Captain Swing to be miles away before they burst into life, leaving smoking ruins to kindle the imagination. Stories were spread of a 6-foot giantess astride a black horse, always seen sporting a crimson cockade. She'd stop at workhouses to distribute fancies and sweets and silver coins in a generous cascade. And later, a man with mustachios was spotted in a London chemist asking for Promethean preparations in a Welsh sing-song. He required a chemical to attach to arrows that burst into flames in contact. Could he be another candidate for Captain Swing? Some said that Captain Swing was an itinerant Irishman who'd been seen selling leather straps to the gentry in market towns. Others said that he was called Johnny Bonny from Bishop Stortford, and that Johnny Bonny was a kind of half gypsy. The poet John Clare was so struck by these stories of mysterious visitors that he satirised the rumours in his rhymes about flamboyant phantoms stirring up discontent in his poem, The Hue and Cry, A Tale of the Times. Some said it was Cobbett, some said it was Paine, some said went into France to seek Voltaire. But when they got there, they got back again to find that nothing had really been there. One zealous East Kent magistrate thought he was on Captain Swing's track while trying a vagrant tramp, Charles Blow, and a child from his village. One Mary Johnson, whom the suspicious magistrate described as of a cunning and intelligence beyond her age. So Mary Johnson, aged 10,
was held for several months in Lewes jail in the obscure hope that she would reveal Captain Swing's identity. Sir Robert Peel wrote, "Great Britain will adopt any measures to detect offenders." But young Mary Ann Johnson could tell them no head could tell anything. But the longer that Captain Swing evaded capture, the wilder became the myths. He can only be killed by a silver bullet that is laying in a golden bowl of spring wheat for a year. But who had a silver bullet? And who will spare the grain? But common sense shows that there was no mystery about Captain Swing. Captain Swing was merely the nom de guerre of the starving, resenting their being ignored, and at a loss how to be avenged other than by torching hayricks and smashing up 18 machines. In Essex, 70% of the population were agricultural labourers. On the Dengie Peninsula, on the North Sea coast, everyone depended on winter threshing work, so when the machines arrived, the whole area was lost. But the King's response would be, every civil official will do his utmost to bring to trial the perpetrators of the unrest. And the King's new Prime Minister, Lord Grey, told Parliament he'd end the outrageous activities of the labourers. "I declare that it is my determined resolution, wherever outrages are permitted or excesses committed, I will eliminate them." But for all the bullying talk of sending in the troops to quell the disturbances, there was barely a mention of redressing any grievances. Instead, the Lord Lieutenant of Buckinghamshire, the Marquis of Chandos, hired hundreds of men to suppress the turmoil, to put a stop to the horrid attempts of some diabolical miscreants to injure property and produce confusion. The Duke of Wellington boasted of his determination to repress England by force, as he callously said to Lord Melbourne as they both sipped high-class port. "Sir, I concur with your wise reflections upon the absolute cheek of incautious promises to raise wages to 12 shillings a week." A royal commission set up to inquire into how the established church had been administering the poor laws reported that the riots were due to contagious infatuation caused by the activities of certain evil-disposed persons. The church, in its wisdom, took it upon itself to devise a customised prayer to reassure the genteel. It was to be used in all churches against strikes and riots, but oddly, none of the church's spells were successful. The farm workers' other enemies were the overseers, the chiselling bailiffs employed by absentee landlords who kept farms for amusement. Those the landowners left in charge would chisel the wages and skim them to the lowest fraction, a heartless venality exploiting the workforce to the edge of destruction. In challenging the 3 landowners that owned half of Shropshire and rerouted their county's wealth to the Mayfair gaming tables, farm worker Dickie Whitfield lit an inferno to follow them to London by teasing up half their property for the fire engines. And although facing the gallows, James Lee at Shrewsbury Jail talked freely of a plan to shoot one Sir Robert Hill, as the gentlemen, he ventured, would go on as they were until they were shot as they were in Ireland. And yet the government persisted in denying the existence of any real agricultural distress, saying repeatedly it's due to the effects of unfavourable seasons. Or so the Lord Chancellor said, to ease an idle king's anxiety. But none of them realised that this bad weather was fogging all their reasons. but nonetheless, none of their great titles will give them any immunity, as the Duke of Devonshire was soon to discover, for swing soldiers vowed to burn down his Chatsworth house estate and pay him a visit from which he'd never recover. Protected by his guards, the Duke airily told the Derby Mercury, there exists no particular distress amongst the lower orders of people, who were, his Grace said quite obliviously, well affected and peaceable. Captain Swing then became fiercer. Sir, your name is down amongst our placards, and this is to advise you to make your will. You have been the blind enemy of the people on all occasions. You have not done as ye ought. Yours, Captain Swing. This year, we destroyed the corn stacks and the threshing machines, and next year we'll take a turn with the parsons, and the third, he continued, we'll make war on the statesmen. This was the message that Captain Swing led for a high sheriff. As people flocked to join swing mobilisations across 20 counties, one crowd liberated 13 workhouses in one day, and as country folk were crippled by the payment of church tithes, they ripped the church altar rails out for their self-defence. We fired the mills! We fired the mills! Said James Warner of Albury before he was hanged. Wild, independent, desperate men, historians described. The real name of General Ludd was Captain Swing. The earlier movement in the town prompted Byron to cry, down with all kings but King Ludd of the Luddites. They were now joined by the countryside with superadded fervour. In 1830, Swing took over Ludd's franchise. On November the 15th, the swing labourers of Arundel, Bursted and Felpham destroyed every threshing machine in their area, followed by Emsworth, Funtington, Rowgate and Westbourne, Chitters, Bosham, Yapton and Westbourne, Fishbourne. 2 days later, 1,000 labourers gathered at Chichester on market day to secure better terms for their employment. The gentlemen, their spokesman said, will have estates bedewed in blood, or do what's fair, and will not crush a flower. Every county in southern England was said to be an estate bordering on insurrection. This part of the country is wholly in the hands of the rebels, wrote Buckingham's Duke to his fellow peer, the Duke of Wellington, as red and black flags were and tricolours were unfurled and carried through the air by swing crowds. One read, I'm damned if I don't wish it was the French Revolution. And the lifeguard sent to suppress swing refused to act. The labourers have not only destroyed all the agricultural machinery, wrote a panicked magistrate to the Home Office, but they dictate a rate of wages by a system of pillage. Lord Melbourne responded by sending in the 9th Lancers, who seized upon anyone looking agricultural or troublesome, whom they then frog-matched to Andover jail, only for a huge multitude to follow them, breaking into the prison and returning them into the streets in triumph. The justices at Rickmansworth begged Melbourne to send troops, as they hourly expected attacks by incendiaries. Their rural folk, who they described as being 1,000 desperados, as an unruly and lawless set of people. Other authorities spoke of radical scoundrels, excited by the heroes of the barricades in Paris. Maidstone, its magistrates said, is infested with radicals. Horsham, a hotbed of sedition. Horsham, a hotbed of sedition. Sir Robert Peel was warned, 20,000 men will march over from Kent to attend a meeting of political incendiaries. The ruling class now feared their kind would be swept aside, as they had been shortly before in France. So, Lord Melbourne granted all civil officials immunity for criminal acts committed in the discharge of your duties. But the Home Office still couldn't recruit any special constables, as even fewer candidates wanted to come forward. And then the crowd stoned the lights on the King's London routes, and they stoned an even riper target, the Bank of England, because the government had been borrowing hundreds of millions to fight self-indulgent wars with the French. They then had the gall to repay their borrowing by taxing bread. They taxed the bloody newspapers berated it. Then any expression of discontent became grounds for arrest, and meetings of over 50 were banned. Magistrates were given powers of stop and search, and the slightest thing could lead to someone being hanged. A Home Office directive from the Honourable James Lamb to a landowner's agent in Derbyshire read, "Don't be too gingerly about laying hands on any suspicious characters that may be about in your locality." And when a Colchester worker demanded, supported by his friends, demanded his dues, "I wish for 2 shillings a day and beer, that is all," he was arraigned at Chelmsford Assizes with tumultuously assembling and rendered liable to the death penalty by Mr. Justice Taunton. A sailor, Robert Price, reported, "The poor are so downtrodden that many lie under the sod. It's your dandy houses, your dandy habits and sinecure places that have brought the country to this state. It's to be wondered at in England that the productive poor are to be seen starving and tormented in the highways, hanging and drowning themselves to end a wretched existence, while the unproductive take so much from their earnings. For the average wage then would be 9 shillings, which a family had to spend largely on bread, with precious little left for rent or anything else. What lay in store was to be evicted and then to be dead. There'd be virtual slave auctions, with paupers tied to carts, harnessed with bells round their necks, for children might be bought from workhouses as pauper apprentices to furnish the labour force for the first factories, in a profitable arrangement between the church overseers of the workhouse at St Pancras and the owner of a large cotton mill near Nottingham. Children were told, on acquiescing, they'd be transformed into fine ladies and gentlemen, fed on roast beef and plum pudding, allowed to ride horses and have silver watches with plenty of cash in their pockets. But of course they were only told this so they'd leave without making a fuss, for they'd never to be given any such things, just the honour of being a small cog, an industrial machine that an unscrupulous capitalist empire had lured them into. The example of Richard Knockholes illustrates the system at work. After being hanged at Norwich Castle, the swing rioter's body was exhibited for a penny a look, from which his widow was unable to benefit. And although more and more of swing soldiers were transported to be slave labourers in Britain's colonies abroad, and though large rewards were offered to anyone catching a rioter or to anyone turning King's evidence against friends, and though when the Riot Act was read, people had 1 hour to disperse, after which their misdemeanours became capital felonies, and though their determination to object to their lingering starvation would from then on become punishable by death, and though subservient troops armed with carbines were summoned, and though swing rioters were summarily shot, and though their children were sold into cotton mines and into mills, Captain Swing succeeded in resurrecting the peasants' revolt. When Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman? As John Paul and Wat Tyler had subversively queried, but swing soldiers had no Ball or Tyler, for no one knew their leader was. But nonetheless, swing soldiers would besiege the great houses. They'd surround in a ring and throw all their demands into the centre. One and all will stand by one another, they'd shout, each one of their faces pitch black with soot. Gathering together as they did in great crowds of the disaffected, such direct action worked again and again. They'd get well-heeled parsons across England to get rid of their tithes and get greedy farmers to increase their wages. And if Swing's letters and posters didn't do it, then Swing's legions of rick burners certainly would. And the authorities' fire engines would find their hoses slashed if they extinguished any landowners' machines. A large landowner in Whitney was warned, remember that in Kent they set fire to those who would not submit. We are determined to pull down your thrashing machines, for we are 5,000 men and we will not be stopped. In Wales, the unresponsive and uncooperative were subjected to ceffyl bren. They were strapped to a wooden horse and dragged down the street to the sound of rough music from banging cans, rattling sticks and rusty kettles. Landlords were faced backwards and asked why they always insisted in their going in the wrong direction. Just imagine the same happening to the CEO of Morgan Stanley or swindlers such as Goldman Sachs. Convicted machine breaker Ben Hackshaw from Little Clacton commemorated his swing activities in verse. He wrote from jail, "It was on the 8th day of last December, as many of us do well remember, when Little Clacton mob did rise, which put the people in surprise. We rose up in the dead of night, which put the people in a fright. For higher wages was our scheme, likewise to break the lodge machine. So in the morn we went straightway and broke it up without delay." Ben Hackshaw and his friends had exposed what Captain Swing described as the unfeeling conduct of the rich towards the poor. "Revenge for thee is on the wing," they chanted from thy determined Captain Swing. "A message for thy clergy, gentry, king, all you fine gents and ladies, all you useless things, beware, revenge for thee is on the wing from thy determined Captain Swing. Beware, revenge for thee is on the wing from the determined Captain Swing. Revenge, swing!" That's the end of the first half. We shall start the second half of The Invisible Captain Swing, Demon of Direct Action by Heathcote Williams. The first part of the second part of the poem begins with the description of one of the events that ignited the Captain Swing insurrection, and it took place in Oxford when a large common north of Oxford was enclosed by the local landowners and the Oxford colleges, and lots of local rural people were thrown off the land. So Captain Swing, the invisible demon of direct action. On Otmore's wetlands, the cottagers ancestrally grazed geese to supplement a sparse income, until those who thought that big fish had a right to eat little fish thought they'd take over Otmore's land. The church would observe there are no gentlemen living on Otmore, and snobbishly, Otmore supports no families of any note. So Oxfordshire diocesan officials would callously collude with the high-handed notion that Otmore was more or less empty and thus up for grabs. The reason being that Oxfordshire's grandees and the Oxford colleges had its eyes on their marshes, thinking if they drained them, they could steal its rich soil, then fill it up with their tenants and employees to cultivate it for profit, while evicting Otmore's freeborn who'd been there since doomsday. But their enclosure acts were a plain enough case of class robbery, as the Marxist historian Edward Thompson would later observe. It was played according to the rules of a parliament of lawyers, property owners and elitist clerics, but Otmore had been used forever for construction materials and to dig peat for the fire, and it was rich in fish, in wildfowl and in rabbit, and its reed beds were full of the hosiers for the Moors basket makers, all of which offered a free living to the poor. So, to counter the threat, the Moors people gathered defenders who'd disguised themselves with black scarves, and then after that, arming themselves with billocks and axes, would tramp across Otmore's sedges and rushes, past Fencot's Plosh and Foul Spill, and across Marlake and through the Flits or Otmore's lush hollows, skirting round the accumulations of quaking bog known as the Pills of Murcott. Otmore people would wade through the mudflats by the light of the moon. Otmore people laid claim to web feet. They'd destroy the fences to renew their common rights and destroy the drains to restore their wetlands. They line up too deep outside the Crown pub at Charlton to be issued with edging gloves to go cutting. Our Fencott blacksmith, William Hillsden, melted lead for bullets, and they destroyed 1,000 yards of fencing each night. They then patrol their 7.5-mile border, which they call possessioning, each one of them crying out, "Otmore forever!" They then declare that its 4,500 acres belong to the King of Otmore and to Captain Swing, his stalwart lieutenant. Oxford constabulary were defied, and any police who turned up were greeted with, "Here come some of the white-eyed buggers," and chased off. When a local policeman accused Richard Neal from Charlton of blowing his horn to signal a nighttime raid, Neal denied that he could raid common property and said he'd do it again, and that if any man attempted to take his horn, he'd stick him with it. After which the incoming police scuttled off, leaving Otmore alone, the Moors people's outlaw state. Police couldn't be billeted in any of Otmore's 7 villages without stones being thrown at the windows. As Superintendent Layard said, you approach an Otmore beer shop only to have Mrs. Higgs shut the door in his face. Then the keystone brick of Arch Land Encloser, the Reverend Theophilus Crook, was removed by our Charlton Mason, William Neal. causing it to fall, thus depriving the clergyman of his privileges. So he took matters straight to the top. The outraged clergyman wrote to the Home Secretary, "The parties engaged in these riotous proceedings have formed a formidable body and act under certain leaders and riotously assemble. I beg for your assistance." And then the Duke of Marlborough sent in the Oxfordshire cavalry to arrest leading Moors men and bring them to trial. They arrested 44, but in ferrying them to Oxford, the Duke's wagons had to pass through St Giles Fair in Oxford, where a peep show was showing a diorama by Louis Daguerre of the late Revolution in Paris, just like life. So when the revellers saw the Otmore captives, they shouted, "Release the prisoners!" followed by "Down with the bloody officers!" One fairgoer was the radical John Pudsey Sydenham Welshman, who'd been known to pen a swing letter or two. Welshman seized upon a pile of bricks and masonry on the corner of Beaumont Street to hurl at the Duke's contingent and scatter them. Then those with Welshmen set about releasing the prisoners, relieving the troops of their Otmore charges, and the grandees of the land that they were trying to steal, those who'd be forever stigmatized by the popular rhyme. They hanged the man and beat the woman that steals the goose from off the common, but let the greater criminal loose that steals the common from off the goose. But as the landlords used the courts to deprive them of their birthright, Otmore's villagers took the law into their own hands, and by destroying the encloser's invasive paraphernalia, their success had a strong ripple effect. "The rich have had it their way long enough," said Philip Green of Tadmartin, "and now we will have it ours." Whereupon the free miners of the Forest of Dean rose up to put a stop to the enclosure of their ancestral lands. Bishops were burnt at Canterbury and Exeter in effigy, and their clergy were mobbed by their own parishioners. "Why should we bribe you to get to God Almighty?" they ask, depriving the church's clergy of their tithes. At Brede in Sussex, an unpopular overseer of the poor, John Abel, was dragged into a cart with a rope around his neck and taken to Vinehill near Robertsbridge and shot out into the road and told if he came back he'd get his head broke. Prison at Derby was sacked, followed by Preston and Nottingham, and for his berating the scum of the collieries and quays, the Duke of Newcastle's mansion was burnt to the ground. At Bristol, demonstrators destroyed the Mansion House, the Custom House, and the Bishop's Palace, described as inexplicable outrages by a blind parliament who urged that Captain Swing be caught and sorely oppressed. At Winchester Assizes, batches of 20 were sentenced to hang, the purpose being to inspire terror and make examples. "I do not," Justin Alderson said, "inquire into grievances. We come here to decide law." And then he dispatched them. But before all this, once upon a time, before all this unpleasantness, men and women worked together in the fields when agriculture was more communal and low-tech. The new, heavy, male-operated machinery was dividing the sexes, confining and condemning the women to the home. The advent of agricultural machinery would liberate the landless labourers to starve, quickly making them vulnerable to the Industrial Revolution, to ironmasters and robber barons in satanic mills, while the craft skills of the cottage economy were withering. When the country was ravaged for coal to serve steam power, and pollution's great euphemism, progress. When the urban population swelled to fill up their new factories while ignoring the land's carrying capacities. When it was judged in man's folly that nothing should constrain the mechanical writhings of Mammon's tentacles. When Parliament decreed the demolition of property in manufactories a hanging capital offence, as it curbed the expansion of capitalism. But had the impetuous Captain Swing had the gift of second sight, he would have seen how prophetic what he did really was. With agribusiness wrecking the land for a monoculture of money, they draw down Swing's curse on their fast food farming and on their pesticides derived from war's chemical weapons, the chemical hammers that bludgeon the soil, enslaving the good earth to a pervasive supermarket state till chemical seepage has quite worn it out. And also the curse on the multinationals who commandeer the world's food by patenting its seeds and modifying plant genes, persuading peasant farmers in South Asia to buy their hyped-up products only to be sucked in a spiral leading to suicide, and decrying the biotech moguls who, like the landlords before them, have been ruthlessly suppressing indigenous cultures, swapping the symbiotic sound of insects and birds for money's crackle and the stench of agri-chemicals. The mentality that Captain Swing sought to correct still infects governments seeking to control and profit through hierarchical systems, as subsistence farmers are reduced to debtors squatting their land as Africa's agriculture's taken over by corporate land grabs, and the third world's ancestral forest is clear cut to satisfy the rich West's appetite for cash crops, for biofuels and palm oil to bulk up an assembly line diet, thus destroying the original inhabitants' habitat. The threshing machines weren't destroyed just for the sake of it, though wrecking them might have been fun. It was done so that people could control their own labour and resist the imposition of the factory system. Instead of being suborned into being a cog in a machine, people were invited to be a spanner in the works. The passion for destruction is a creative passion, as Mikhail Bakunin would say only a dozen years later. And that the women's work was dispensed with was resented, especially as the labourers' own innovations were strictly illegal, namely their combinations, their early trade unions, all cruelly suppressed. These were the reasons for Captain Swing's absolute defiance. But Captain Swing would pioneer techniques of industrial warfare that would serve not only to fight Mammon's machinery, but all the exploitation tricked up as progress. Captain Swing never existed, but he has always existed to represent a sense of popular justice, to rattle the gilded cages of totalitarian capitalists, the hoarders who are guaranteed police protection. Captain Swing's axes were the cutting edge of a moral economy. His firebrands there to singe those who would starve the poor, those still cheating us with jargonised gibberish, where stealing a person's future is quantitative easing, where liars loans and ninja loans and leverage and all the financial instruments of toxic risk allow the rich to harvest trillions in fabricated currency, all meaningless to nature's seeds underground, and where vacuous sales pitches are called economic growth, and where speculators' food mountains are forbidden fruit, and where the avaricious enclosure of humanity's communal assets is readily licensed by nightmarish national security states. Nonetheless, Captain Swing dances through history. He resurfaces in the peasant leagues of Andalusia and in the paysans attacking the engrosseurs in Ariège, those who inflate the price of grain just to swell themselves, and in the tree dwellers and tunnellers of Salisbury Hill in England, attacking the developers' earth-moving equipment, preventing them from burying the landscape beneath motorways and strangling Albion with spaghetti junctions, and in the food rioters who vehemently object to the government taking over their fields and transforming them into ethanol, not to feed mouths, but machines, namely the internal combustion engine.
That's right.
Captain Swing's spirit pervades the landless peasants movement in Brazil, and Emiliano Zapata and the agrarian utopias in rebel Chiapas, those stopping US corporations corrupting maize, the first cultivated plant in human history. Somos hombres de maize, as they proudly say in Osaka. We are people of the maize. They have no wish to say we are the people of the test tube, enslaved by corporate thieves. But once upon a time, rural folk had a mystical dream of a utopia for the poor. It was called the land of cocaine. In France, Pomona, it was the pagan island of the apples, where there would be plenty of everything in a golden age, and the relation of master and servant did not exist, where food was free and cows filled ponds with their milk, and we lived in arboreal houses in the air. In all such stories, which long predate the TV hearth, such as the Irish High Brazil or the Dutch Lukkerland, the country of the young, sparkling wine would flow forth in rivulets. The shops would be full of mouth-watering fruits of the field, each one marked, "I'm free, as it all belongs to you." Such memories are persistent, from the Isles of the Blessed to hobo dreams of rock-candy mountains, making one wonder if humanity's progress isn't simply compensation for what we've lost to neurotic self-invention. Though perhaps a poor comparison with a thrush, we have overpowering pretensions, perhaps obscuring what we once had in a more secure ecological niche. It may be that with more trees there was more oxygen, and we all lived longer and were happier. So perhaps an atavistic delight in sabotaging an unholier present derives from memories of paradise buried deep in our DNA. But Martin Luther King said, "A riot is the voice of the unheard." And for those who produce the community's food in England, to be treated as a subspecies was a pre-revolutionary situation which almost transformed the whole nation. And yet Karl Marx would sneer at the idiocy of rural life, and he would praise the bourgeoisie for subjecting the countryside to the rules of town and enormous cities, and for increasing the urban population. And furthermore, his fox hunting friend Engels supported him and his family with the fruit of child labour from his cotton mills. Thus, left and right are unsettlingly meaningless when it comes to nature and humanity's role in it is concerned. For there are no left-wing leaves or right-wing flowers, just the sun and the wind and the rain, and the sole idiocy is to deplete the topsoil through greed and toxify the magic of rivers and lakes. And yet, the multinational industrialisation of plant life and the commodification of sentient beasts flung onto the conveyor belt of capitalist abattoirs meant nothing to progressives for decades. And yet, Captain Swing was no armchair revolutionary, as poet Robert Taylor would write in his poem of 1831. Captain Swing, who were the incendiaries, where he praised the rick burner's strength. The labourers whose voice speaks in mine, wrote Taylor, try petition after petition, but are denied a sufficiency of the fruits of the earth which their own labour has tilled, till want and agonizing hunger have driven them to madness, and madness gives them strength where reason was weak. So Captain Swing teaches the world, though by a fiery lesson, that he who would live must allow his neighbour also to live. Taylor claimed, the power has now passed over into the hands of the people, and your bayonets, your gunpowder, your prisons, your legalised murders, none of them can compete any longer, for Captain Swing now sits on England's throne to banish all tyrannous notions concerning those who were called the swinish multitude, for we are the sovereign people. Captain Swing was a cross between Robin Hood and Crazy Horse, fighting a triumphant battle of the Little Big Horn, only for Swing's tribes to be herded into urban reservations, there to be poisoned by industry smallpox, poisoned by playing with arsenic and benzene and lead, continuously stifled by coal dust until the earth, the water and even the air fell victim to carcinogenic killing machines. But pendulums swing, and that agrarian anger lives on. A logging company called Boise Cascade in Oregon is torched at a cost of $10 million. And when US Steel was killing off Lake Michigan, a character surfaced called the Fox, who jam up the company's lakeside drains with logs, straw bales and rocks. The Fox would climb up to cap off smokestacks to give those inside a taste of their own medicine. The Fox would then dump industrial sewage on the shag-piled carpets and desks of corporate executives. When asked how long he intended to roam, the Fox said, I like to see flights of mallard across the sunset, and I prefer to hear frogs croaking than hear some guy boast about how he's increased his profits when he's done it by destroying nature and thinking his own habitat is more important than anyone else's. So I'll be the Fox till I see to results. A 206 unit condominium in San Diego was destroyed, leaving a mass of burnt out mansions. A banner beside it read, if reality, for more destruction of urban sprawl, the elves, who claim their destruction of luxury homes, which they describe as economic sabotage, is non-violent, as each house is checked beforehand for the presence of living creatures. And they add, there are 6 billion people on the planet, of which more than a third are starving. So building luxury homes is not a priority when farmland and forest and wetland is being covered over by a sea of houses, chemical lawn, asphalt blacktop and roadkill. For the land is being bought out by developers because farms can't compete with cheap corporate GM and pesticide saturated food. So now it's the time to decide what's important: the health of the planet and its population, or the profits of those who destroy it. The message beside it was signed by the Earth Liberation Front, and in 2005 they moved into car showrooms. In August, ELF activists targeted car dealerships in East LA, burning down a warehouse, destroying more than 130 vehicles, all Hummers and SUVs with abysmally low fuel efficiency. The FBI's head of counter-terrorism, John Lewis, said, eco-terrorism, unlike what the press say, is the top terrorist threat, having chalked up more than 1,500 actions since the late 90s and totaling more than 1.5 billion in property damage. Yet, like Captain Swing, such terror groups have killed no one. Yet, like Swing, they attract the harshest punishments. For setting fire to 3 cars, Jeff Lewis, nicknamed Free, has to serve 22 years in jail before the name's accurate. But civilization is imprisoned by an even greater combustion, one with insidious side effects on the brain. For petrol engines pollute heart tissue with their particulates, making people the victim of arson every day. Tolkien wrote, "The world has changed. I see it in the earth, the water. I smell it in the air. Much that once was is now gone and lost forever. For none remain who remember it, save for Captain Swing's heirs, with a monkey wrench for a memory stick." Tolkien later wrote of the infernal combustion engine and how it had no right to be invented. The only bright spot, he commented, was the habit of disgruntled men of dynamiting factories and power stations. In 1977, the Iroquois Confederacy of Tribal Peoples addressed the UN, denouncing machinery harmful to commonality. Chicpo women saved 100,000 trees in 100,000 actions. They firewalled them with their own flesh. And linear gold succumbed to pressure from indigenous peoples who physically prevented the mining at Ixtohan. The holes they dug there are their graves. And when the Achua Indians saw Occidental oil contaminating the Corrientes River, they had every oil tanker and drill bit removed from Achua lands by collectively threatening to commit mass suicide. And the Quichua Indians in Peru blocked roads and barricaded the Napo and Carrere rivers, making them impassable to Repsol and Parenco oil, thus saving Peru's forests from contamination. The Kayapo Indians in Brazil, the Nahuatl in Mexico, and Pagan Indians in Alberta, Canada, have all stood their ground in the face of machines, riding roughshod over the rights of ancient people. And though our roadways may still seethe with segmented metal vampires, Eden serpents feeding on barrels of dark oily blood, and though the system's shareholders may pay for more company profits, Captain Swing can still set a fishbone in their throats. London is now the capital of the moneyed world, boasts an estate agent in London's Telegraph. The super rich, he crows, now consider it their second home, until homeless squatters lance his pampered elitism. And Canada's parliament has been shut down by demonstrators, and those unorganised coincidences. Flash mobs have shut down Canada's parliament for refusing to debate climate change and for being hawk to the companies ruining their wild wastes. Spontaneous groups have come together by word of mouth to create something new that can't be ignored. A smart mob overwhelms Edo's Brighton Arms Factory to jam up the bullets in the barrels of Edo's guns. I don't feel I'm going to do anything illegal or immoral tonight, announced Elijah Smith in advance, but I'm going to break into an arms factory and I'm going to smack it up so it can't produce munitions. In Greek myth, the powerful Titan Prometheus stole fire from the gods, and much to Zeus's fury, he gave it as a gift to humankind. Perhaps it was to prove both a blessing and a curse. And then Zeus, in his fury, took to chaining Prometheus and us to a giant rock, only to have an enormous eagle constant descend with outstretched talons to rip and tear at our regenerating liver, as if to punish us for turning the gift of fire into gunpowder, and into Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and into gas chambers, and into thermobaric missiles who turn people into crisp, showing that Captain Swing was firefighting a catastrophic future. Our world, as John Stuart Mill would predict, where the spontaneous action of nature is absent, was a future equally dreaded by Wordsworth. A footpath faintly marked, a horse track wild, a formidable length of splashy lane, have vanished, replaced by stately roads, and wheresoever the traveller turns his steps, barren wildernesses are erased or disappearing. And Wordsworth would nail it in his golden text. One impulse from a vernal wood teaches more of man, of moral evil and of good, than all the sages can. But once upon a time, in Kentish fields, men and women would take a break from haymaking to have something to eat and drink, to tend the children, to sharpen their sickles. And when they felt like starting again, they'd all line up, they'd raise their arms, and someone would shout, "Swing!" and they'd swing their sickles in motion, cutting the hay down to size. Hundreds of years later, overblown buildings tower out of concrete saturated soil, each one filled from top to bottom with commodity speculators gambling on the price of grain by cheating those who've grown it, those who might like to cut them down, shouting, "Swing!" And although those moth-eaten dinosaurs, the monarchy and the aristocracy, have long since been replaced by the CEOs of corporations, their accumulated wealth is still vulnerable to the weapons of the weak, because a hacker's keyboard can still sharpen Swing's axes, erasing at a keystroke the profits of money-snorting Midases who ruin and are ruining everything they touch. Take the number crunchers at JP Morgan, currently profiting from mountaintop removal, or MTR for more coal. And take those who annually feature in the Sunday Times Rich List, where, thanks to an abomination of a system, 1,000 or more than a third of the total wealth. And take those who are still happily handing out billion-dollar bonuses to those still happily sowing the seeds of destruction, only to pause to stain the sky with chemical trails as they holiday from their nature deficit disorder. And Midas's corridors daily fill up with more machinery, thus stifling the pollinators necessary for the production of food. So Mother Nature's party instinct may well be mass human misery and starvation. And as for fiddling while Rome burns, Nero was an amateur, for Wall Street would enclose the entire planet, allowing Midas and Mammon and Moloch's machinery to transform the earth into a ransacked Death Star. And the earth's tribal peoples are now being killed for their coltan, for communication devices, from cell phones to computers. So their vanishing culture's signals are jammed by their killers communicating themselves to death. Coltan is found in the ores of 3-billion-year-old soils, and it's used to make tantalum capacitors, the components that control the flow of electricity in devices from drones to spy satellites. And so, yet again, children are pressed into mines to be overworked for poisonous profit, but not this time, not for coal, but for columbine tantalite, the metal that allows us to store humanity's mental powers. The mental powers that allow us to send young children off to die searching for coltan in Congolese mud, while our own in Europe and America can enjoy PlayStation and squeal as they zap aliens. Percy Shelley said long ago, "O men of England, wherefore plough? For the lords who lay ye low. Wherefore feed and clothe and save, from the cradle to the grave, those ungrateful drones who would drain your sweat, nay, drink your blood. The seed ye sow, another reaps. The wealth ye find, another keeps. The robes ye weave, another wears. The arms ye forge, another bears. Sow seed, let no tyrant reap. Find wealth, let no impostor heap. Weave robes, let not the idle wear. Forge arms in your defence to bear. O men of England, wherefore plough and sow and reap? For the lords who lay low. And centuries later, warlord nations still primp and strut and bomb them who serve them to oblivion. Horses, dogs, horses and hogs are treated with more civility, was William Cobbett's view of England's third world. But Captain Swing's avenging cries unchanging, and signs of the hated system are still torched. A few miles from Otmore, and 2 centuries later, 6 activists from swords into ploughshares break into a US air base at Bryce Norton, bristling with F-111s all poised to bomb the biblical site of Eden. Those involved all dressed up as Mickey Mouse, the American Idol, judging that the guards would be reluctant to shoot Mickey. They entered undetected and then smashed up the fighter bombers' undercarriages. And then, after pulverising the cockpit's instrumentation, they covered the planes in snapshots of their relatives and a message. We know who you've been killing. You're planning to kill more people just like us. And later, Ulla Rhoda, Ellen Moxley and Angie Zeltzer took a swing at a nuclear lab, the laboratory, Loch Goyle in Scotland, that services Trident missiles. For just as you can smash a house's door in, they argued, if there's a child trapped inside, you can dismantle the backup for a 100-kiloton warhead seething with mass destruction. First, they tipped Trident's computers and monitors into the lock. Then they destroyed its maintenance electrics with a blunt instrument. Then they disabled a winch with a stick and some powerful glue, showing that simple tools such as sticks and stones can crack a nuclear nut. For as with the Ewoks in the Return of the Jedi, the simplest tools, such as sticks and stones, can disable any technoid's death-dealing devices, however much they may dominate the unaware. Captain Swing was one of humanity's great avenging righteous demons. His direct action, a Medusa, aimed directly at those human disgraces who had ruined both people and land. He is resurrected in the resistance of those in many places opposing all the capitalist grand plans. Captain Swing was a great social volcanic explosion that ground all the machines to a halt, the machines that were grinding the people into the dust. He's echoed in the volcanic plumes of angry mountains who stopped all the world's high flyers, forced all the world's high flyers to take a rest. And now, even the planet itself is sending angry messages as the oceans gag on the poisons that corrode them, filling up with more plastic than marine life. So who's to stop Mother Nature herself from running riot and drowning our carcinogenic cities as the waters rise? Captain Swing! By Heathcote Williams. Hey!